Penny Wong, welcome to the programme.
Good to be with you.
Why do you think President Xi is moving now to re-establish formal relations with the US and with Australia?
First point I'd make is we welcome the meeting between the Prime Minister and President Xi yesterday on the margins of the G20. It's a positive step. We welcome it. There are obviously many more steps to be taken. In terms of the US and China, obviously that relationship is a particular relationship between great powers. That they have had more engagement than Australia and China have obviously had over the last few years. I thought it looked a very constructive meeting between President Biden and President Xi. And if you look at President Biden's readout, where he talked about competition not escalating into conflict, I think for all of us who want a peaceful region, that is a good thing.
Now, we know that Chinese leaders choose their words very carefully. What did you make of Xi's statement that China's relationship with Australia deserves to be cherished?
Well, again, I leave it. Plenty of people will comment on or analyse what President Xi said, but it's I think reasonable to talk about why we're meeting again. And,
but I think
why this relationship
I don't mean
does
to.
matter.
I don't want to interrupt, but I expect that you have a view about.
You just did.
I expect that you have a view about Xi's approach towards Australia at the moment. It's a phrase that stands out, deserves to be cherished. I'm interested to know what you think about it.
Well, what I was going to go on to say was one of the things I have spoken to Foreign Minister Wang Yi about, and that the ambassador here has also made clear, is obviously this is a relationship which marks its 50 years this in the coming months. And I gave a speech, there was an event in Sydney over the weekend which went to that. And I think, you know, the engagement with my Chinese counterpart, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, and has made clear that both sides value the longevity of that relationship. It was a big thing for Gough Whitlam to establish the diplomatic relationship. Our view is that we should continue to engage with China. We should cooperate where we can. We will disagree where we must, but we will engage in our national interests.
Let's try and understand that a bit better, because President Xi went on to say that the relationship with Australia stands at the forefront of China's relations with other developed countries. Did that phrase surprise you, Australia at the forefront?
Look, there are a lot of things that we can pass or not pass in terms of what leaders and foreign ministers and ministers say. I think fundamentally, what I have said to China is this: from day one, we believe it is in the we believe it is in the interests of both countries for the relationship to be stabilised. We believe it is in the interests of both countries for trade impediments to be removed. And we'll continue to say that. We also have said, obviously, Australia will continue to assert our interests, and we will also continue to stand up for our values, and just as China does.
He held meetings with a number of world leaders. How do you explain Xi's diplomatic blitz?
This is the first face-to-face leader-level summit for some time. It's unsurprising that President Xi would not engage widely as President Biden has. But of course, we know how China is in the world, and we know how China sees itself in the world. And obviously China is seeking as a great power to engage and express its interests, assert its interests. We know that. President Xi has articulated that quite clearly. I think we go into the engagement with China with a very clear eye about that, and understanding where our differences are, where our interest lies, and thinking through how to manage those wisely.
Is it also China's economic outlook? It's challenging now. Can he no longer afford to alienate his key trading partners?
Well, as I said, you'd have to ask someone about their analysis of the internals, but there's no doubt. Look, I'll go to the substance of your questions rather than the commentary point. I mean, look, you're right. The economic position that China is in is more challenging than it has been. Obviously, COVID has affected all economies, including the Chinese economy, and regrettably, that's having an effect not only on their growth but on global growth. And we're seeing some of that flow through to what's happening in Australia and more broadly.
So what's next for Australia? Will you now go to Beijing?
I think the PM talked about that yesterday, or responded to a similar question to that last night after the meeting, and he said, look, there'll be a lot of steps. We agreed to further dialogue, and we'll take each step at a time, and that's what we'll do. We remain open to further engagement and dialogue.
But is it your hope that that will be achieved in the year ahead?
I think I'd go back to what I previously said, because it probably isn't good to try and plan that ahead of time. I think what we have said: stabilise the relationship, continue to engage, express our view about our interests, our values, express our view that we should manage those differences wisely, and that we remain open to further engagement.
Would the release of imprisoned dual Australian-Chinese citizens Cheng Lei and Yang Hengjun be a condition of a visit to Beijing for you?
Well, look, I think first I'd say about Ms Cheng Lei and Dr Yang is they are our highest priorities. We raise their continued detention at all levels regularly. We continue to advocate for being reunited with their families. We continue to provide consular assistance, and that remains our continued position.
Can I just ask what the last exchange you had on that subject? Because I know the Chinese ambassador went so far as to acknowledge that there was something wrong with a mother not seeing her children. What's the last exchange you had about Cheng Lei and her family?
Yeah, I don't, and you'd understand this, Sarah, because we're obviously managing this very sensitive and really high priority set of issues in the context of a diplomatic engagement. So I won't give you word for word what's said in meetings, but I would say this to you. I think that all Australians would be united in their call for Dr Yang and Ms Cheng Lei to be reunited with their families, and I think Australians would be particularly aware of what it is for a mother to be away from her children, and for her children to be unable to engage with and be with their mother, and that at a human level is something I think we would all express.
How are you going to use this new momentum to persuade China to end its trade embargoes on seafood, wine, barley, coal and other products?
Look, ultimately, it's up to China to make a decision about whether they believe those trade barriers are in their interests. We've said that we don't believe they are. We've said that it's in the interests of both countries for those impediments to be removed. It's in the interests of China to be able to consume and purchase those products, and we think it's in the interest of Australia to be able to export those to China.
Now, to keep up that momentum that we're talking about, you've got a lot of things that you need to happen. To maintain that momentum, do you also need to lower the temperature of criticism of China over human rights in Hong Kong and in Xinjiang?
Before the election, I think I made very clear what we would do, and what I've tried to do, Sarah, is to keep faith with that. And we said there are differences. We have differences which will have to be managed by whoever is in government, and those differences go to our interests, our belief in international law and international norms, but also to the issue of human rights. And whether it's China or any other country, we will hold true to our views about them, about the importance of human rights. We will continue to advocate for human rights. We will continue to do what we are able to do to promote and protect human rights in a world where, as you know, regrettably, not all countries share our values on these issues.
Notwithstanding, you used strong terms after the UN's report on Xinjiang was released. You described the stories therein as harrowing. Will you have to
I'll say it again. If that, I think, I think they were harrowing, and I know that many Australians feel deeply about this. I know that the Uyghur community in Australia feel very deeply about this, and just as we express our view on human rights in relation to other countries, I think it is incumbent upon us to express our view on human rights in relation to Xinjiang. But the point you made about tone does matter. I don't think we were made any safer. I don't believe Australia was made any safer, nor do I believe human rights were any more promoted because the previous coalition government decided that playing domestic politics with the China relationship was sensible. And I'm pleased to see that Senator Birmingham and Mr Dutton appear to be resiling from that approach.
I want to talk about President Biden and the situation with Taiwan. The meeting between President Xi and President Biden also appeared to lower the temperature on Taiwan and the threat of a Chinese invasion of Taiwan or a blockade. Do you read this as, in any way, as Xi stepping back from the brink?
Well, whoever is responsible, I think it is a good thing for the world that the temperature is being lowered. So what we have said, and it's consistent with what President Biden said in his readout of the meeting, we support the status quo, we support peace and stability in the region, including in the Taiwan Strait. We do not support any unilateral change to the status quo. And that is what the world has lived with and what has enabled peace and stability, in part, has enabled peace and stability in the region for a long time.
At the same time, China's policy towards Taiwan is unchanged. At the recent Congress, Xi was putting the military on an aggressive footing. He told them to step up their combat readiness. Could this new approach or this new language about Taiwan simply be about China buying time to secure military superiority over the US?
Look, on Taiwan, I'm simply going to again state what our position is. Support for the status quo and with others seeking to ensure that there is no unilateral change to the status quo. I mean, Taiwan is a difficult issue. It has been for decades. And that is why we have a bipartisan one China policy. It's why the US has taken the position it's taken and the region has taken the position it's taken.
Finally, we seem to be on the cusp of a renewed diplomatic relationship with China. What could threaten that now?
I have always been cautious about the sort of terminology you just used, renewal, reset, etc., because it seems to me, we've had a relationship for 50 years. It's been in a difficult place. The important way of thinking about it is to stabilise the relationship and seek to find a way of managing what will be ongoing differences at times. I mean, there are differences we have to manage, different interests, different values, and I believe there is a way, if both countries make wise decisions, to manage those differences in the context of a strong bilateral relationship. That will take time and it will take a fair degree of patience, I suspect.
Finally, how much of a feather in the cap for the new Prime Minister is this meeting? After all, Xi went out of his way to say to Mr Albanese, "I attach great importance to your opinion."
Look, I think it was very welcome, the meeting, but not just for the Prime Minister but for the country, because it is a good thing if we are able to engage in dialogue. It's a long way to go, but it was a positive and welcome step.
Penny Wong, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Good to speak with you, Sarah. Thank you.